When algorithms make hiring decisions, generate client pitches, or even write devotionals, how do we as Christians stay grounded? Well, today we're going to talk about the ethics, the impact on vocation, and what faithful presence looks like in a world run by code. Welcome to Nuance, where we seek to be faithful in the public square. So last week we talked with Todd Korpi about how AI affects our work and humanity. So today we're going to continue that conversation and go a bit deeper, looking at discipleship and ethics in the world of technology. So I'm glad to have back author, researcher, Professor Todd Korpi. Todd, thanks for doing part 2 with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Those who are listening or watching, please share this episode. Leave a comment, helps us to reach out even further. So Todd's written this book entitled AI Goes to Church, published by University Press. And in it, he asks this vital question: how can followers of Jesus live and lead well when technology threatens to outpace our humanity? Or maybe not. Now, in the last episode, we began to dive into some of the theology around AI. We talked about using it well, that it can be a blessing and a benefit to society. So, Todd, this week I want to maybe go a little bit to a higher level. So some guiding principles that AI can apply to anybody in any kind of industry. Sound good?
Sounds great.
So talk to me about what kind of ethical frameworks should guide a Christian when they're using AI. And I'm particularly thinking like when it comes to truth, when it comes to justice, when it comes to loving thy neighbor. Yeah. Where is AI helpful or not so helpful in that?
I think as it pertains to truth, recognizing that kind of when we specifically, let's zoom in on the kind of the most popular use case that we talk about when we refer to AI and kind of in a general sense. So like large language models, what we call generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, these applications that allow you to essentially search for information and get back searches the web for large quantities of information and synthesizes it into a response. And when it comes to the subject of truth, last week we touched a little bit on the subject of wisdom, and that pursuit of truth is something that has existed for as old as humankind itself.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But the way that we have pursued truth has changed over the course of time. Kind of roughly speaking, we can look at ancient cultures and still some cultures today value the function of wisdom, kind of the right application and discernment of knowledge in a specific context or situation as the chief kind of pursuit of truth. And so the value of the elders at the city gates that we see in the book of Ruth, of adjudicating circumstances and promoting community harmony and stability, we see as kind of this chief value. As the Enlightenment emerges, we see the function of knowledge as being closely associated. If we have the right facts, we will have access to the truth. And then almost as soon as the Enlightenment kind of takes shape, this reactionary postmodernism begins to have its seeds planted, which we see really kind of take full swing in the 20th century. And now, where truth is often pursued or achieved by experience. So we
Sure.
see that in our popular culture, like discourse, through terms like my truth. And none of those things are inherently bad, and none of them inherently have the market cornered on what truth is. In fact, Jesus actually goes as far as to say in the book of John, I am the truth, And so truth functionally, fundamentally terminates in the person of Jesus.
How very postmodern of Jesus.
Yes. But truthfully, if we see the function of wisdom, of knowledge, of experience, you add scripture into that, and you essentially have the Wesleyan quadrilateral. And so Wesley was riffing on the ethics of AI before AI even existed. But I say all that to say we live in a society now where the value of knowledge is very much there. The value of experience is there. we haven't really worked out the role of wisdom. And I think in most of us would say that in our society, which has unbelievable access to not only the span of human knowledge, but also for AI to be able to synthesize that and teach it to us in a way like never before, we're still not really rich in wisdom. We're very
Mm,
knowledge rich and wisdom poor. And so I think recognizing as it pertains to truth that AI can deal in knowledge, but humans deal in wisdom. The ancients closely associated the cultivation of wisdom with intimacy with God, with suffering and enduring faithfully in the midst of trial. Those are things that
mhm.
ChatGPT just can't do. And so I think recognizing we have this call as God's people to pursue wisdom, to really chiefly value it and prioritize it,
Sure.
to be able to kind of cut through the noise of facts and knowledge that AI gives us to rightly discern how to apply it. When it pertains to
Mhm.
justice, I think one of the things that we often kind of assume as data in this kind of general sense is unbiased. That if we have enough data, we will be able to achieve kind of this perfect, objective truth. The reality is that the data that all these large language models source from is sourced from human knowledge, which is knowledge from humans who are fundamentally flawed and sinful and biased. And so we have to recognize, and I think this is super important for everyone, but especially for Christians, to recognize that data is inherently biased. And we see examples of
Mm.
that. I talk about that in the book of things as simple as like AI being used in hiring practices. It will disadvantage people who stand out from the norm. So if you have, AI looking for the perfect engineer, it's going to look for the type of person who most often is engineers, which is males, and then would. There's an example that I use in the book of how in this particular case of an engineer, would automatically filter out any resumes that reference women's colleges or had a
Wow.
female name
Wow.
and things of that sort. It has the potential, even in image generation and things of that sort, to amplify stereotypes and biases of ethnic stereotypes and things of that sort. It's often it promotes almost superhuman notions of beauty and attractiveness in a way that it just doesn't match up with the reality of the human experience.
Sure.
And so I think being aware of that bias, that just because AI gives you that information does not mean it is gospel.
Okay.
That I think is super important.
So I don't imagine you maybe know the answer to this, but isn't eHarmony, wasn't it kind of billed as like a Christian dating site?
I don't know if eHarmony was. Christian Mingle was, and
Oh,
I think
that
there's
okay.
one
Maybe
called
that's
like
that's it.
Plenty of Fishes or something like that too.
Yeah, yeah. I had to find a wife the old-fashioned way. Um, is there anybody out there maybe making a Christian large language model? And I wouldn't want it to be so myopic that it wouldn't say, "Look, this is the Christian view, but then there's other worldviews." But I don't know. Is that my billion-dollar idea?
There actually is. So,
Oh, dang it!
this is this is one of the examples that of how quickly this technology has changed. So when ChatGPT launched their large language model, it cost billions of dollars. It took an unbelievable kind of workforce. It was out of the reasonable reach of anyone that didn't have access to billions.
Sure.
Not, I think it was 2 years later, a Chinese company, DeepSeek, did it for a fraction of the cost. And I think it required like 20 employees or something like that.
Wow.
And so it's slowly that cost has become more and more reasonable. And Glue, which is a Christian organization,
Yes,
GLOO,
I've been to
uh,
their
and
place in Boulder.
yeah, so just in July of 2025, launched a beta for a Christian large language model. And the thing that I love about it
Ah,
is they're very open. So the actually in when you're interacting with the LLM, it will cite the sources that it's sourcing the information from. So it's not
okay,
this kind of opaque black box of that it's pulling from. It tells you where its sources come from.
okay.
Glue actually has like an expanding suite of partnerships of licensing agreements with content provider. So they're not just stealing information, but actually working with organizations to provide that kind of content with permission. And then is very rigorously protected in the kind of information that it presents and things that and the safeguards that it has and stuff too. So it's actually a really good example, and I'm sure there will be more that come out as time goes on. But first to the market is often, a very
Yeah.
good thing to do. And I've had the opportunity to play around with it. And it's very, very exciting.
Well, I've got a colleague who was talking to me about helping him out. He has been in the crypto world, and he was worried about large language models twisting with truth, twisting with scripture, with the catalog of Christian tradition and heritage in the books sitting behind us. And so he was looking at creating a business model around capturing in blockchain the truth of the Christian tradition so that AI one day would not be able to make up its own stuff and not be able to twist. And we would have sort of like we have libraries with the old text and manuscripts in them, that the commentators don't just get to tell us what did the Bible say, but we actually can go read it.
Yeah.
And he was particularly interested then when it came to your life story. How do I know that my grandkids aren't going to say, tell me about Grandpa Case? And either it makes stuff up, it filters out my Christ-centered perspective. So it's a whole other world. Now, in your book, you talk about digital discipleship. Okay, so talk to us about spiritual formation in the midst of this very fast technology world.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways in which AI can enhance the spiritual formation process. One of those that I'm absolutely just dogmatically convinced it cannot do is to replace the human component of AI, of spiritual formation. There is an inherently kind of flesh to flesh sort of dynamic to what it means to grow in the faith that I think is indispensable to our capacity to mature into the image of Christ. There's also, I think, a very real temptation that I think is unhealthy to overly associate discipleship with content delivery and assimilation. That discipleship is essentially learning the right stuff. And there's absolutely a component of discipleship and spiritual formation that is learning. But if we reduce it down to that, we neglect kind of the broader environment in which we grow in the faith, things like the relational influences in our lives, things like direct communion with the presence of God, and things of that sort. So even things as simple as kind of the rituals and habits that sustain our spiritual growth is really important to consider. But when it comes to specifically that learning component, there are a ton of ways in which AI can help enhance that to be able to hand tailor and contextualize it to the specific needs of the individual. One example is there is a ministry called Jesus.net that specializes in discipleship-oriented content for people. And their back end database is powered through they use Salesforce, which has kind of an AI engine in it.
Right.
And they've developed essentially a set of what they call spiritual KPIs or key performance indicators for those not familiar with that jargon. And basically, these are the outcomes along these 12 kind of buckets that we want our users to grow into in their faith. And so when someone registers, the program takes a benchmark kind of survey to get a baseline of where they're at in their faith. And then as they interact with the content on the website, it continues to solicit feedback from them and measures their growth along those 12 key performance indicators. And then will recommend content to the user based on the areas where growth is most needed. And so that's huge to be able to kind of help a holistic picture of growing someone along in the faith. And so there's a lot of opportunity And that's something as simple. I mean, that's a lot of work on the back end. I don't want to discount the hard work that Jesus.net has done, but because they use an existing platform like Salesforce, there's a massive component of that that's actually plug and play and very attainable for a church, any sort of ministry to be able to do.
Yes. And so I'm a Bible nerd, and biblical illiteracy is one of the greatest plagues, I think, on the present day church. And I could see how something like that could really help me as a pastor get a greater sense of where my congregates are and how to lead in that. And it's not a short-term mission trip. It's not a trip, an afternoon down in our homeless ministry teaching the Bible. Those embodied experiences are so, so very important.
And I think to that point, I think kind of one of my passion points is I think about how much time, and I actually really didn't think about this a lot until the COVID. And coming out of COVID and how like significant it was to actually spend time with people. I remember the first time taking communion in person with my church, was like, it was holy on like another level because there was so much significance there. But how much time we wait, I don't want to use the word waste, but for lack of a better term, waste or underutilize by using the times that we gather together for the purpose of one-way communication.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity to offload that content that we communicate in a one-way kind of lecture form to be able to be absorbed or interacted with on an on-demand basis online. And so that way we can actually use the time spent face to face for dialogue, for question and answer, for wrestling with topics. Like how would that change our discipleship classes in church and things of that sort, to be able to kind of wrestle with those ideas, really take maximum use of that precious face to face time to dialogue instead of monologue.
Okay. I heard a pastor in a sermon reference a random interesting answer he got on ChatGPT, and he attributed it to God speaking to him. Your thoughts? Can God use ChatGPT?
Well, when we see in scripture that God uses a donkey.
That's right. And you and me. So great.
Yes, which, yeah, I've, yeah. So I think that, I think it's good not to conflate the voice of ChatGPT with the voice of God, obviously, though I'm not sure I've met anybody that's done that. But I think that I'm very adamant about the fact that all of digital technology, every digital environment, social media platform, all of it is under the reign of the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it's holy. There are many aspects of creation that Christ, by virtue of his resurrection, has staked his claim to rule, but are desecrated places, as has been said before. But I think that because Christ rules over everything, he has the power and the capacity to use anything he so chooses to communicate to us. And I think so. Yeah, I think that ChatGPT can be used by God to communicate to us.
And it takes wisdom to discern that and figure that out.
Just like it does from the voice of a friend, honestly.
Well, sure. Yeah. Okay, so we have some pastors that listen, but of course we have Christian leaders, even laity, no matter their status. Talk to leaders in the life of the church about how best to equip and prepare congregants for this.
I think one is so there's kind of this open discussion right now of how pastors should, if they should, how church leaders should employ AI. I think welcoming your congregation or your lay leadership into that conversation is a incredibly healthy and wise decision to make.
Just naming it. Y'all, we're going to talk about this.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to wrestle with it. Barna did a study last year that showed that among the responses, most respondents, which it was just churchgoers that were a part of this study, it cited a overall negative or pessimistic perspective on AI and a self-admitted ignorance on it as well. So it's like, we don't know anything about it, but we really don't like it. It's kind of the lay of the land. And
Sounds
so,
like a Democrat or Republican. Kidding. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
but I think so I think there's an opportunity really. We're in dire need because digital tech is a part of our lives so significantly. We live kind of this hybrid existence where we're constantly online and offline. My
Sure.
dishwasher spends more time on the internet than I did as a
My goodness.
teenager.
Yeah. I just
And
went and bought new washer and dryers, and my wife was like, "Don't get anything with buttons. I want turn knobs." And I go in there, and they have them that hook to your phone and the internet. I'm like, really? Really?
Yeah. So I think that I actually don't remember where we're going. Now I'm thinking of my washer like singing to me, the
See?
chime that Samsung does, Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that, I remember we were talking about discipleship. So
Yeah.
I think
That church thing. Go
we
ahead.
need to really think about how do we disciple digitally responsible believers, and that includes engagement on the internet. Then that includes engagement with AI. So I think having the conversations, wrestling through it together, you'll mitigate the potential drama of tremendous conflict if you're walking in community and making decisions in community about how you use it. But I think for church leaders, one of the best options is to one, start small, use small, low risk use cases of how to integrate it, and start on the back end and the administrative stuff, the image generation. There's, for example, I've yet to meet a pastor that likes building slide decks or PowerPoint presentations as they were. But yeah, like there's an app called Gamma.app that you can sign up for that will build slide decks for you off of an outline in a matter of seconds. That is a gift from the Lord. Like that is a holy thing.
Will it do it from my handwritten notes that are 15 years old?
I actually think you can upload screenshots. Don't quote me on that. Okay. But if so, I feel like Gamma needs to pay me some sort of royalty for the recommendation. But so something like that is I'm sure there are people that would have a problem with it just cause, but most people would see that as a net positive. Automating, like I said, to use the words of the Finnish philosopher Pekka Hymminen, to automate the boring bits of church admin. And it's not so you can reduce your workforce, but so you can empower them to pastor people, to be present with people and to pour into their lives.
Yeah. Show me that AI that answers all my email at once. That'd be great.
Amen.
Okay. Let's end our time here. My passion and our focus is often the public square. We carry a Kuyperian perspective, and for our listeners and viewers, that's Abraham Kuyper was a theologian and even the Prime Minister of Netherlands, where he breaks down society into the marketplace, the family, government, the arts, and religion. And so we kind of, at the collaborative, see the church runs with the family piece, and we try to lean in to the other areas. So talk to me about public policy, tech culture. What's the Christian's role in even like humane boundaries for AI? How do we speak into what's being fashioned around us?
Yeah, I think there's this tension that, again, I often point to Wendell Berry to help resolve. He wrote an essay back in the 70s called Think Little.
Explain to people who he is and why he's special.
So Wendell Berry he's a poet, an ethicist, and has written just prolifically. He's a Christian, based in Kentucky, lives on a farm, and has really done kind of a prophetic voice amidst, changing culture, changing technology, of thinking through the things that we often don't think of when we just rush into adopting some, a new technology. And he wrote an essay back in the 70s. So the height of a lot of, civil conversation and a push for, there's, a lot of environmental concern. And he kind of critiqued some of that in that we almost had this tendency to kind of outsource. This is something we very much do today, to outsource our or like our virtue to governments and agencies. We vote so someone else will take care of the thing, so we don't have to worry about it. And what we end up with is this dissonance to where we vote for politicians that are pro environment, and then we'll on a day with weird weather, we'll open our windows while the air conditioner is running, or things of that sort. And so he challenged his readers to do what he called think little, essentially to align your everyday, the everyday minutia of how you live your life with your stated convictions, and let that be what is an overflow of that spill out into what you advocate for socially, the policies that you vote for, and things of that sort. So I think one of the tensions that we have, especially here in the States, is we have a political climate that is woefully behind the times when it comes to understanding technology. We see that anytime a tech mogul or goes before Congress, it's like,
sure,
there's so there's a knowledge gap there that's significant that I think we really need to address. But I think that advocating for policies that promote the ethical use of AI, of regulations that that restrain some of the perspectives and practices of tech giants, a lot of whom are I don't know how familiar a lot of people are with the term long-termism, but long-termism is essentially this idea that what matters is humankind's flourishing, 500 years from now. And then there's kind of, and maybe at the expense even of human flourishing today, if we can move toward flourishing at 500 years from now, that's ultimately what matters. And there's an extreme form of that called galaxy brain long-termism, which means we're thinking about human flourishing 10,000 years from now.
Dude, that's a whole nother episode. We have to have you back.
Yeah. But a lot of these, tech entrepreneurs are very, long-termist or galaxy long-termist in their thinking. And so but we see in scripture, Jesus concerned with the one, concerned with the individual here and now, not that where we don't think about the future, but we also need to consider the plight now, and recognizing that that's a prophetic space I think the church needs to step into. But I think how we even embody or adopt the use of AI in our own lives, we need to think through how do we do this in a way that is just and is that it does that we do our best to cite rather than steal when it comes to intellectual property. We just try to live above board. Some of that is out of our control, some of it it's not. And I think that we need to think about what is in our control and steward that faithfully as best we can.
I don't know how, I would imagine, I don't know how familiar you might be on the European Union side of regulation. Some of what I see over there seems to make a whole lot of sense, and they are ahead of us in some ways. Some I wonder about, but you have thoughts on that?
I do. I think I think as it pertains to digital tech in general, Europe probably has some of the best or kind of more forward-thinking policies. Like I think it was the Netherlands. I don't know if it was actually accomplished or it was just in process, but I remember seeing a headline of the Netherlands petitioning Meta to require them to bring back the old chronological option for a news feed. So rather than an algorithm determining what you see, it's literally just your friends in the order in which they posted.
Okay.
Which I got on Facebook in 2005. That's actually how it was back in the day.
That's right.
It was amazing.
Well, it is confusing. I'll see something and be like, that was 5 days ago. Why am I seeing that now?
Yeah. Why am I seeing this now? Yeah. And then there's, there's a lot of regulations specifically around AI use in general. There are a lot of, I think it was Time did a piece last year talking about how tech moguls are using kind of like conflict zones like the war in Ukraine as a testing grounds to get around those regulations. So in the name of kind of helping Ukrainians fend off Russian incursions, are creating and testing, things that like facial recognition softwares that could potentially be used for nefarious purposes in the future and stuff.
Wow.
So I think that there's holes to shore up, to be sure. But yeah, I think that by and large, as government agencies go, the European kind of bloc has a really good grasp on trying to rein some of the extremities in.
And yet we know they have such an atheistic perspective. Isn't that interesting that a place that's not so guided by people of faith, as I believe our government is here, in all administrations. That's no comment on this current administration. But they seem to be more progressive or ahead of the curve on what's good for the human and children.
I mean, I immediately think of the book of Ezekiel when I think about I hear you say that. Like Yahweh chastises Judah for its immorality and its negligence on the poor and the vulnerable in its midst, and actually compares the surrounding nations being more upright and considerate in how they behave in that respect, in comparison to Judah's unrighteousness, as a way to show that contrast. And I think that for us, this should be a point of conviction of it, while we're kind of, just arguing over, whatever, there are other governments that are actually making some strides in protecting human dignity in the AI space.
Sure. Okay, last two questions. What scares you? What worries you?
I think the thing that probably scares me the most is that when I finished this manuscript, I turned it in, and my then 13-year-old, now 14-year-old, asked me, like, why did you write a book on artificial intelligence? And I told her, I said, your generation, I was like, how you guys have, on the whole, a lot of struggles with anxiety and depression and self-image issues and things of that sort. She's like, yeah. And I said, well, a lot of that was because when mobile phone technology came out and social media was available now at our fingertips, and we didn't really stop to think theologically or at like a fundamental level about what it meant, how that would change our understanding of simple things like relationship and friendship. And, to see someone's highlight reel of all their neatly crafted and edited photos on Instagram while I'm, scrolling, with my bedhead still a mess and all of that kind of stuff, like that kind of contrast. And I said, now we're having to play catch up to try to kind of fix the ship as it's already set sail.
For sure.
And I'm afraid that we will make the same mistake with AI, that will be reactionary instead of proactive. And I think the church has both an opportunity and a responsibility to really be a prophetic people, to speak into this space with intelligence, not with a reactivity, not with either just an enthusiastic, optimism that is going to solve everything and whatever, but also not this reluctant pessimism that just hopes that if we just put our head down, the conversation will go away. Like, it's here to stay. And just like the internet isn't going away, this isn't going away either. And we need to kind of really wrestle with some of those existential questions for the benefit of our children and our grandchildren.
Okay, that's great. Hope. What does give you hope?
What gives me hope is that, in the public consciousness, because of the works of creatives and playwrights, the first, at least from my research, the first play, the first creative work that ever depicted artificial intelligence was in 1921. A Czech play called Rossum's Universal Robots was debuted. And it's actually where we get the term robot. It's a Czech word for robota, means forced labor. And
I did not know that.
Yeah. And so in the play, humans create these artificial life forms to do all the work they don't want to do. And the robots eventually rebel and cause the extinction of the human race.
Of course.
And I think there's kind of this underlying angst. And we see that those iterations of kind of those dystopian what ifs about AI with Will Smith's iRobots. There was a movie, Subservience, that came out last year of a
Terminator.
The Terminator. Yes, exactly. But what gives me hope is really the same thing that gave early Christians hope as they faced persecution. What has given Christians hope as they've endured faithfully from centuries after century. And that is the certain hope of the final resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come, as the Nicene Creed says, that Jesus is king and he is returning and he will make all things new. And that revolution, to borrow N.T. Wright's terminology, that revolution's been set into motion. And so there is this kind of optimism that I have that despite the questions of, if AI becomes sentient, what's called a singularity event, are they going to take over everything and kill us all? Well, that's not the way that the story goes. And as we read it, and as we've held faithfully to it for the centuries. Sure. So that's what gives me hope, is the same thing that's given Christians hope throughout time. And I think it's a new season, it's a new technology, but same hope, same outcome.
Preach, brother. That's good. Todd, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your scholarship. It's very much needed.
My pleasure.
Well, friends, let me encourage you. Go out and buy a copy from University Press. AI Goes to Church. AI Goes to Church. Learn more about Todd and his work at toddkorpi.com. That's Todd, KORPI.com. And you can go to anchorforward.com to learn more about the work that he and his wife do together in organizational development. We will have these links and a number of others in our show notes. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for joining me, whether you're commuting, in the office, working out, or a quiet drive home. I hope that our 2 episodes here on AI and faith would help you think more deeply about your own walk and work in this world. Learn more about the work of the Collaborative at wecolabor.com. Drop us your email. We'll send you a copy of Zeitgeist, our latest journal with articles about faith, work, and culture. Many thanks to the Stein Foundation for making today's episode possible. I'm Case Thorpe, and God's blessings on you.